Ladies and gentlemen, Sugar Ray Leonard.
Thank you, Merlin. You know, while I was backstage, it suddenly occurred to me that I'm the only one up here tonight who's actually younger than Sports Illustrated. I mean, that's kind of wild, especially when you consider I'm only 28 and I've already retired from my sport. But I remember growing up in Palmer Park, Maryland, looking forward to each Sportsman of the Year issue and thinking about all the past winners, Muhammad Ali in particular, and I say to myself, I want to be one of those guys. And then in 1981, I became one of those guys. And to have that honor bestowed upon me, it was an incredible feeling. Now, of course, I wouldn't have been the Sportsman if Tommy Hearns hadn't cooperated that year. You see, the Hearns fight wasn't just an ordinary fight. It was a symbolic fight because it meant that I was #1. It meant that I was an overall fighter and athlete. Also, it was like the last chapter in a book because, see, everything in my life had led up to that special moment. But then again, a fighter never seemed to have just one last chapter. As you might remember, I made a comeback attempt last May against Kevin the Spoiler Howard. And he was able to do what no man was able to do before. He knocked me down. And sitting there on the seat of my pants, looking up at the bright lights, I realized then that my career should come to an end. And then people say, well, Sugar Ray, why did you retire? Things just didn't go the way I planned. You know, I won the fight, quite naturally, but I just didn't have what was always present, my concentration. And then people say, oh, Sugar Ray, you were so crazy in the first place to get back in the ring. Why would you take such a big risk? I would reply, I've been taking risks all my life, so what's the problem with one more time? But I can tell you, standing here tonight, I'm glad I tried it when I was young, because now, when I'm 35 or 45, I don't have to look back and say, what would happen if? People, I know what would happen. You see, now I finally got the old fight bug out of my system, and I'm very pleased and satisfied with my association with HBO. You know, one of the things that I liked about boxing, it was me against the other guy, you know? It was the one-on-one confrontation. Now, there are other sports that stress individual achievement. Let's take a look at them now and meet our next candidate for Sportsman of the Year.
This was the punch that sent Sugar Ray Leonard back into retirement and set the stage for boxing's next super fight between junior middleweight champion Tommy Hearns and undisputed middleweight champion Marvelous Marvin Hagler. In 1984, Hearns and Hagler both destroyed well-known opponents. Hearns knocked out Roberto Duran, the first time Duran had ever finished on the canvas. Later in 1984, Hagler floored Mustafa Hamsho in his best performance since 1982. The biggest rivalry in tennis got even bigger at the French Open in Paris. In the finals at Roland Garros Stadium, Ivan Lendl beat John McEnroe in one of 1984's biggest upsets and turned his own image upside down. Before the match, Lendl was considered a terrific everyday player who became Ivan the Terrible when it mattered the most. But then, in Paris, McEnroe's McNasty temper got the best of him.
How many times do I have to ask?
Lendl came back to win the final 3 sets and at last his first Grand Slam title. And let's not make too much of the French or too little of McEnroe. Even though Mac the junk fruit freak can hardly stretch below his knees, he still may be the most graceful player the game has ever seen. And at Wimbledon, he had no trouble proving it. His rout of Jimmy Connors in the All-England final can only be measured in artistic terms. And he was just as devastating in defeating Ivan Lendl to win the U.S. Open. As Vitas Gerulaitis puts it, Mac is making shots now that defy the laws of physics. Women's tennis in 1984 was dominated by this Sportswoman of the Year candidate, the incomparable and it seems unconquerable Martina Navratilova. Tennis players call it being in the zone. It means you're in a whole other world. That's exactly where the divine Miss M has been for 2 years now. In 1984, Navratilova won 74 consecutive matches and 13 straight tournaments. She extended her streak in Grand Slam events to 6. After winning for the second time on clay at the French Open, she once again conquered the grass courts at the All England Club by winning her 5th title at Wimbledon. Martina then returned to her adopted home to win her 2nd U.S. Open. She has accomplished all of this by making herself the best athlete in women's tennis.
Well, it's been a gradual process of getting in shape and working on my technique. For the first time ever, I had a coach since I was on the circuit, Renee Richards, and then Micah Stepp for the last year and a half. And for the first time, I really felt that I was learning something. I was basically just playing on instinct and talent before that, and didn't do anything off the court in terms of getting in better shape. And so I've learned a whole lot. But the physical part, it just enables you to work that much harder on your technique because you're in shape to do that. So it all goes hand in hand.
Ironically, Martina's only losses of the year were to 2 other players born in Czechoslovakia, Hanna Madlikova in January and Helena Sukova in December at the Australian Open, a loss that ended Martina's bid for a 1984 Grand Slam. With Martina on the sideline, Chris Evert-Lloyd then defeated Sukova for the Australian title, giving the former Sportswoman of the Year at least 1 major championship in each of the last 11 years. If tennis in 1984 was mainly the province of 1 man and 1 woman, golf in 1984 was wide open. A word of caution about Patty Sheehan, though. In winning her 2nd straight LPGA championship by 10 strokes, Sheehan showed that she has the potential to be preeminent also. Off the course, she supported a home for teenage girls, putting as much into society as she has into her game. Men's golf was a picture of parity. The 4 Grand Slam tournaments went to 4 different winners. Ben Crenshaw ended 11 years of frustration that included 5 second-place finishes in major events by getting his first big win and a green coat at the Masters. Seve Ballesteros, admittedly lonely and floundering on the American Tour, found contentment on the historic links of St. Andrews. Ballesteros won his 2nd British Open in true championship style, closing out his final round with a birdie on 18. The U.S. Open belonged to Fuzzy Zoeller, as did this moment of outstanding sportsmanship. Thinking Greg Norman had beaten him with a birdie on Sunday's final hole, Zoeller waved the white flag, well, the white towel anyway, from the fairway. But Norman had only parred, giving Zoeller a 2nd chance in an 18-hole playoff the next day. After Zoeller sank this final putt, it was the good-natured Australian who finally surrendered. Our Sportsman of the Year 13 years ago isn't about to throw in the towel. Lee Trevino, 44 years old and a full decade removed from his last major championship, won the 1984 PGA Championship by 4 strokes. Was old Supermex nervous down the stretch? Nah, he said, I wasn't spitting any cotton. Another winner down the stretch was John Henry, the 9-year-old Bay Gelding, who won 6 of his 9 starts and increased his career earnings to a record $6.5 million. On a different kind of track, Rick Mears set a record too, winning the Indy 500 with an average speed of 162.612 miles per hour. Now that's moving. It's exciting. It's exciting to be in a room with so many champions, watching great champions perform. Let's look back on 1958. We'll meet an athlete who returned to prominence in 1984. And he did it without having to make a single beer commercial. In 1958, a crew cut fellow known as Johnny U led the Baltimore Colts may they rest in peace, to an NFL championship over the New York Giants, one of the greatest football games ever played. The same year, a young golfer named Arnold Palmer won his first major title, the Masters, inspiring an army of followers. Althea Gibson became the first black to win at Wimbledon and went on to win the U.S. Open at Forest Hills as well. The Sportsman of the Year was Rafer Johnson, the new decathlon record holder. Johnson would go on to win an Olympic gold medal in Rome in 1960 and light a torch for all the world to see in Los Angeles in 1984. Ladies and gentlemen, Rafer Johnson.
Thank you, Merlin. 1958 was the year I really learned what sportsmanship is all about. It was in July in a dual track meet with the Soviet Union in Moscow. The political atmosphere was very tense then as it is now. As a matter of fact, not long before the meet, the windows of the American embassy in Moscow had been smashed and paint splattered all over the walls. At the beginning of the meet, the Russian crowds were naturally cheering for Vasily Kuznetsov, their hometown hero and defending record holder. But by the time I was tossing the javelin in the next to the last event, they were on their feet cheering me. I ended up defeating Kuznetsov and breaking the world record in the decathlon. After the match, the Russian crowd tossed me in the air, and Kuznetsov, who was my good friend, did what is so customary in Europe. He gave me a kiss on the cheek. I'll always remember the warmth and sincerity the Russian people showed me. Sports really can be instrumental in breaking down political barriers. Of course, the 1984 Olympics was another unforgettable experience for me, because I was asked to carry the torch on the final leg of the run and light the Olympic flame. When I started practicing for the run, I felt like I was training for the competition itself. When I made the actual run and entered the stadium, it was a very emotional moment for me. I could see tears in the eyes of some of the athletes, and I felt a part of all those great Olympians on the field. The Winter and Summer Games of 1984 left us with vivid images. Let's look at the images captured by Sports Illustrated's photographers while we listen to the recollections of a dozen American gold medalists and meet our three final candidates for Sportsman of the Year.
After that second training run, I kind of told everybody that they were in a race for second place. I'd anticipated it, but I never really thought about what it was going to be like afterwards, so I really wasn't prepared. It means so much more to me now than it did at the time.
Phil Mayer, slalom.
The thing that I remember more than anything was, first off, my son was born the day that I won a gold medal. But it was just the toughest victory for me because my brother was second place. To know that you're competing with the best in the world and your brother is one of the best in the world was a big, big moment. That's one race I wish we could have tied.
Debbie Armstrong, giant slalom.
I had a feeling there that I'll probably never experience again in my life. I was so excited. There was no place in the world I'd rather be, nothing else in the world I'd rather do. It really didn't matter how I skied. For me to have a gold medal, that's exciting too. But I'd trade that in for the experiences that I had at the games.
Scott Hamilton, figure skating.
I wanted it to be the best thing I've ever done. I wish I would have skated better. And then when I realized that it doesn't matter, I did what I came here to do. And then when I got on the ice and they put the medal around my neck, it was like, I waited so long for this.